Hello, hello. Thank you for joining us on the Scope podcast. My name is Jon Scott, and again, I will be your host today. If you don't know anything about ScopeStack, it's a pre-sales statement of work pricing automation platform that automates all of your IT services scoping needs. And Scope is an opportunity for us to speak with leaders in the space, kind of some thought leaders, those that have use ScopeStack and become essentially experts at using ScopeStack. And that's the case today. So Lex Indigo from Greystone Technology, project coordinator, been on the platform for several years now, and someone that we've kind of leaned on, quite honestly, on our team to get some feedback and test, new groundbreaking features and all that fun stuff. So Lex, thanks for joining us.
Hi, John. Thanks for the introduction. Very glad to be here today. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Cool. Thank you. Well, tell me what you do as a project coordinator.
Certainly. So as a project coordinator, what I do is I work a lot in our pre-sales process. So I work with the project management team and with our technical team, sort of bridging the gap between those two different entities to make sure that everything rolls smoothly through our pre-sales process and that, we get proposals out in a timely fashion, sort of thing.
Yes. This is that role in any MSP that is extremely critical. And if it's not working well, then it really messes up a bunch of stuff, right? I mean, I know working with project coordinators and project managers in general, like they don't get the love that they deserve, right? Especially when they make us look as good as we do quite often. So, and so Lex, you and Greystone and your team, y'all been using ScopeStack for I think a couple of years now, 2 or 3 years. And I kind of want to pick your brain on, kind of open the kimono and like walk through your journey of, adopting, implementing ScopeStack and where you are today with it, kind of get your advice for those that are either considering it or kind of early in their adoption of it. Some things that you can help provide some guidance on, right? Because y'all been there, you've done a lot of different things. And quite honestly, like we jointly, right, ScopeStack and Greystone had like things we had to work through at every single stage. And so I kind of want to pick your brain on that, if you will.
Yes, I'd be happy to go through the journey. It's been a good one and many good steps along the way. So I think that for us, our journey started with, basically our main challenge when we came to ScopeStack was, hey, like we are working in these Excel documents. They're kind of a pain. We wanted to figure out just some easier way to get through that process. It was taking us also, I think, about an hour to generate a proposal at that time. Yeah. So we were looking to both, figure out a way to deal with these templates that were really clunky and difficult to work with. We had like 8 different Excel templates that we would use, like 18 different proposal templates that we would use. So being able to, sort of start working with ScopeStack to get that stuff, handled differently, I think was a big change for us. Like it's one of those that, like being able to implement ScopeStack for us wound up being a huge time savings. Like proposal generation time wound up getting cut in half, and a lot of our blueprint stuff wound up being handled a little more seamlessly as well on the platform. So that's sort of the first step that we started to take, was just with one division. Like we in our company have a couple different departments, but the professional services division was the one that really first was leading the charge. Yeah. That was the first initial part of starting to roll out ScopeStack. And over time, we have also begun to add other departments into ScopeStack, since we realized down the road, hey, there's many other people within Greystone that also generate proposals that take so much time and to save them a lot of time as well. So that's sort of the high level overview of like, what the journey has looked like so far.
Yeah. So probably kind of, I want to go back to the very beginning, right? When we first started working together. Tell me, can you give me some, okay, we're in the first steps of, we're crawling and we want to start using ScopeStack. What were some of the things that you and your team had to think through that was different than how you were doing it? And like you really had to make a transition from how you're doing it to how we thought about services. And I think we ended up like meeting in the middle, right, based on the feedback. So kind of give me some like pros and cons at like the very initial adoption stage of ScopeStack. What do you remember as being a crappy experience? And like, what do you remember being like a really good kind of aha moment for the Greystone team?
Certainly. So to go through some of those things when we were crawling. So the very first part of that question is what are some of the things that we had to think through to sort of align the way that we do business versus how ScopeStack has it set up in the platform.
Yep.
Some of the things that we had to think through, I think, during that time were, you know, one of the big things was like, okay, approval workflow. How are we going to make sure that this gets approved? So we needed to, visit with our leadership teams to talk about, okay, so how do we want to do approvals? And that really started from like a very basic level of, so let's look at first our services. Who needs to, have say in how the services are built? And who should be able to, decide that this is how we're doing business as Greystone. Who's approving those? So we need to make sure that we're on board with the technical team about, okay, the technical team is doing this, and here's what the technical team is going to be responsible for from that element.
Yeah.
Then there's also a business perspective where we needed to talk with the leadership team about who needs to have eyes on a proposal before it goes out the door, which teams need to have eyes on it before it goes out the door, and really solidify that process so that you're going through it in a way that there will be a track record generated in ScopeStack so we can see the history of an opportunity and have it be kind of tracked. So you can see, okay, it was scoped on this date, it was approved on this date by this person, and we check, that allowed us basically to build the workflows within ScopeStack so that it would match our business process as well, and that, when we could just go we could just go through a scope and it would go seamlessly. That was one of the big things that we had to kind of look at internally to talk about those things.
Do you feel like that was a worthwhile kind of exercise did that help at the end of the day, or was it just, I mean, even take ScopeStack out of the picture, right? Like, do you think that would have been a worthwhile conversation to have regardless?
I think it was absolutely a worthwhile conversation to have regardless. And it, led to conversations of, first of all, like, do we like how it was honestly an opportunity to review our processes and go, is this how we want it to be?
Yeah.
Do we want it to be like this? Is this effective? Are there any places where we could change it and make it better while we're doing this? So, it's anytime you can kill two birds with one stone, it's nice to do that. So being able to do a process review at the same time as you're, potentially implementing a new tool was a really good time to do that.
Right. Awesome. So, yeah. I mean, I think that's, part of the, the opportunity that you get, right? We've had customers say, hey, this made me think completely differently about how we go about project approval workflow and services. It forced us to have a conversation between, I think you mentioned this, like between post-sales engineering teams and then the business on the sales side. Like, we need to make sure those two teams are working together, right? And sometimes it's very easy for us to say, hey, sales is happening over here, pre-sales is doing their thing, post-sales is doing their thing, and like no one knew what the other was doing. And so the idea that we can combine like level of effort with the pricing, it involves all those teams, I think affords you an opportunity to do exactly what y'all did. So that's awesome.
Very much so. And I think like sort of expanding on that, like one step that we didn't take at the beginning that I wish maybe we had taken would have saved us a little bit of pain is, talking to some of the other departments as well within our organization. Like if there's anyone that, that generates a proposal that they may be a fit for ScopeStack. I think that, the exact fit is IT services. We also have a lot of different departments within Greystone that do so many different things that they wound up being interested in ScopeStack as well. So we wound up doing like a rebuild, honestly, of the way that we had ScopeStack built out. I think about a year into it when we realized, hey, all these other departments want to be in ScopeStack too. It's not just PS that wants to be there. So I think it's worthwhile not just doing a review of your department, but doing a review, just talk to multiple different departments, like, talk to different business leaders and see, hey, like anywhere that there is a proposal, just talk to them and see what their workflow looks like, see if they may, and maybe it's not right at that exact moment that they want to go into ScopeStack. Like they might want to, that's sort of what we did is we were like, yeah, let's test it here. And then before we, throw it into, our MIT teams or some other big teams like that, let's, test it internally, make sure we like it. And then we roll it out to others in the company. So that can be another, I recommend having that conversation at the start because it will affect how you build out the tool. Like there's a section where you can build out lines of businesses, which professional services would be a line of business in our
Yeah.
world. Web development was another line of business. Training is another line of business. Like, those are examples. We built that out completely wrong and had to redo it. And so it's one of those that building it right from the start really does help you. So if you can really get an idea of what your organization looks like, who might potentially, even if the answer is no right now, like who might potentially be a
Yeah.
candidate for ScopeStack in the future, like leave room for growth is what I think the takeaway is for that is, have those conversations at the beginning and leave room for growth so that if people want to come into ScopeStack later, it's not going to break everything and make it more difficult for you to do analytics in the future.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
That
really
being said,
interesting.
yeah.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, right? Because of course, we had an opinion on what a line of business was just based on our experience in other organizations, right? And that was a little bit different than yours. And so I think that was a good transition into, all right, so you had the conversations with the rest of the business to try to get an idea of like who's going to be coming in the future, kind of build a funnel roadmap for that. But with that, so y'all started with the professional services team first, right? I mean, that was the team that you're mainly responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's kind of dig into that. Okay, this is step 2 of, all right, we have it. We have the structure kind of figured out in the platform, and it's really that structure that allows us to like do the automation and drive the efficiency. So we have that figured out. P.S. Where'd you start there? Like, how'd you start rolling that out for a particular group in a production environment at that point?
Yes, so we did extensive testing and rollout. Like at Greystone, we really try to do things a little bit with care when we're rolling out an internal tool. Like, it's one of those that like we want to do this where everyone's going to have the perfect experience if possible. So what we did to that end is we did kind of a big project plan. Like we like treated it like an internal project, and had our project managers work with us so that we had a really solid foundation for the plan. Is one thing that I think helped immensely. So get a project manager to help you is, I think, a piece of advice I would have. They're awesome. They're good at what they do.
To herd all the
Yes,
cats.
internal project.
Yeah.
Yes, herding cats is the most valuable job. But yes, so that it's one of those, like, what we did is we did a pilot group with a select set of key stakeholders from within MIT who were going to be, going through the process, and with, our key technical team that was going to be executing on projects, because there's a partnership, between those two teams of MIT and professional services that always has to work and be perfect, as well as, there's a third team, even client success, who is part of that process too. So basically, first you identify, here's all the people that are going to touch this process, have each of those people test the process, and do a mock-up of it first before you start making it go live. We also did, basically a process where we asked for feedback afterwards. So we had a survey where we, asked a couple different questions, had one like, hey, just here's general feedback, and we got feedback about what worked with the process, what did not work with the process, where things needed to change. So we did a very robust rollout with that, and I think it served us very well in making sure that the experience is going to be good for every single person that works in the platform.
Well, and that served, I feel like, served our partnership well too, because it wasn't a, hey, I think we could do better this, or, it wasn't just random feedback. It was true feedback based on a test case, And so I think that's what allowed us to work so effectively together, because the feedback was very specific and it wasn't all encompassing, and there was just a lot of good that happened both from your internal, but then also the external, from you to us conversation too, which I hope, I think is why y'all are still on the platform. So, all right. So you did an internal project plan. And again, I mean, kudos to how well you did that and how well you executed that. That's a big deal. What were some of like the immediate pros what was some of the immediate positive feedback you're getting from the team in that stage?
So yes, some of the immediate feedback that we got that was positive was from our PM team. Really, anyone that generates a proposal, they will tell you it cuts the time in half. It's wonderful. That was one thing that we really liked. We also use ConnectWise PSA integration. That cut that's my time. I used to go in and build the project plan in ConnectWise all the time. Yeah. That suddenly became automatic. So being able to have those pieces just flow automatically, it was wonderful. We also started being able to have our work plans available in ConnectWise so that we could, actually have a list to start looking off of during the project. So it helped us be able to manage our projects a little bit better too, because it basically kind of cut out some of the, hey, where's the work plan for this? We used to have to go back to an Excel document sometimes to go look at all of our steps. And
Right.
now it started to just suddenly be in ConnectWise after everything was set up so that we could just, have the proposal right away. We could get into ConnectWise quickly and just start running on a project, whereas sometimes it would take us a little while to be able to set up a project
Yeah.
and just everything would go slower. So it, got us finished with it got us to the point of here's a proposal in someone's hand faster, and here's the point of we can actually start the project a little bit, just even a little bit sooner makes a difference on some projects. We can start the project a little bit sooner, and it's more effective to be able to manage the project through because you have all of the checklists and everything that you need already in ConnectWise without needing to do anything to set it up afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that to me was kind of an eye-opening experience like several years back, and it was I didn't realize. I mean, we were trying to solve the scoping piece, the pricing, get that out because again, that was the world we came from and trying to solve that. We didn't realize until a year in that hey, if you could actually take all that work you just did and put it over in this other system, like that's a whole other area of the business that you can improve. And so now to be able to do that and have alignment between what's being scoped on the pre-sale side and then actually what's being delivered on the post-sales side, I mean, that's the end all be all. And we can kind of talk through, next stages of that at another time. But all right, cool. So going through, start scoping projects. Do you remember how long from like that initial project case and testing to like going into production it took you and the team?
I'm trying to see because I
I feel like we
think
started in stages, right? Or was it just like you cut the switch on and everyone's using it? I can't remember.
Oh, we did so many different stages. We did so many stages and so much testing.
Yeah.
Like I feel like for us, we moved, I think, at a pretty glacial pace. Like we wanted to be absolutely sure when it was time to make the plunge that we were ready to make the plunge, basically.
Yeah.
So I think for us, it took a couple of months. I want to say like at least 60 days, I think, was our transition and
Yeah.
testing period. Might have been longer than that. Something like that. So like, and that may not be the case for every organization, but for us, we wanted it to just be done really thoroughly. And
Right.
everyone does have their own, regular jobs that they're doing at the same time of this as well. So it was about where can we slot this in
Yeah.
to be able to make it, work effectively and well.
Exactly. All right. So, and how long have you had the pro services team in a production environment? Like, I think we said like a couple of years now. Is that right?
It's been a couple of years now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a minute. It's kind of funny, like thinking back on, oh yeah, like ConnectWise integration. That it feels like it's so second nature now. I almost forgot to mention it. This is just so part of how we do everyday everything now.
Yeah.
It makes it so seamless and so easy for us.
Well, and again, I think I mentioned this earlier, like that integration is what it is today because of y'all's feedback, because of, some other organizations' feedback. But like, that's what any software vendor wants is someone that is invested in the testing and providing the feedback. So like there can be that true partnership, and so I think that I feel like that's one thing that we did well collectively is work together on all that. So, all right. So PS has been using it for a couple of years. That next stage was adding in, I think, MIT. And so that's your managed services team, right? Just to clarify.
Yeah, that's our managed services team. That's MIT. There's also development and there's training. The ones that we have fully integrated into the platform now are, development and training. So those
Okay.
two are the other two lines of business that are currently in. MIT is a work in progress. I
Okay.
have many
Sorry.
dreams, goals, and plans, but yes, not quite there yet. But I have dreams and goals and plans of that very soon at some point.
Got it. Okay. So you started rolling in additional areas of the business. Any learnings in that stage of now scaling out your implementation of ScopeStack into other areas of organization? Did you have to think through anything, or had you kind of prepared already for that? To your point earlier.
So I think that to basically approaching the other lines of business, we had to think. I think more on a broad scale of, okay, how are we going to, basically make sure this is built to allow each of these different lines of businesses to work effectively in the platform? Like,
Yeah.
how can they find their stuff? How can they, do what they need to do? to be able to easily get into what exactly they need to see. We had to do a little bit on our end in just making sure that we had certain business processes set up, like opportunities. We had to start working a little bit more conscientiously in our in
CRM side.
ConnectWise,
Yeah.
to make sure that that was set up so that we could have an opportunity that's tied to the right sales manager, for example, so that it would show up as because the sales manager comes in automatically when you attach an opportunity to a project in ScopeStack.
Yeah.
So we had to make sure that that process was set up and it was what we wanted it to be. So that sort of that's the part that ties to here's our financial forecast and how are we holding our financial forecast. Like we started to need to look into questions of how are we tracking revenue for these different LOBs and make sure that the revenue tracking was set up properly, because that it's done automatically now through the integration with ScopeStack and ConnectWise, which is amazing that I don't have to go in and put in the numbers manually by hand for every single opportunity anymore. Like that, it's one of those that it's a great tool, and to be able to have that work, what you have to do is talk about at a high level, and this is engaging with the people that are tracking your revenue for the business. Is okay. So how is your revenue being tracked between these different LOBs, and how do we need to make that set up in ConnectWise so it's going to do the right thing for you?
Yeah.
So we had to do some preparation around that and making sure that side of the house was ready. There's also like every line of business has a different need for what their proposal is going to be. So we needed to go through a little bit and like talk about, okay, what's your proposal? Which services do you want to build out in the platform? Like, how are we going to set you up for, what are the things that you need as templates? Like review of templates, I think is I don't know that I mentioned it during the first part. We did do a pretty extensive review of templates as part of this. Always good to do the review of templates before you go into, trying to bring those templates into ScopeStack so that, this is what we're doing. And if it's not, then maybe let's change it.
Yeah.
So that, it's easier to have it when it's built in the platform.
Yeah, I mean, I often find myself having conversations with clients around, hey, this is how we currently do it, but we had to do it this way because of the limitation around the spreadsheet or the formulas or whatever. Well, now that you may not have those limits, or you might have new limits, quite honestly, like you got to think about, how do you go about building the services? And it really is we've had people before that understand how to price a service, but they have no idea what language goes in the statement of work. And then we have the opposite. Hey, I can write proposals all day long, but I have no idea how to price that service. So, and again, kind of goes back to earlier, like having those teams talk together, work together, and because that's really where you start to experience the scale is the combination of language and pricing and ScopeStack, right? And then we can push all that data wherever you want, to your point in this phase, but in order for that to be meaningful, especially meaningful once you start adding additional layers of the business, like you have to think through the differences and the nuance in each. And so, it takes some thought going into it, if you want to do it right.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yes, it is that partnership of all those different teams to make sure that it's going to work right. And I don't think that I've talked much about the pricing side of it, but that's a very important part to make sure that you're thinking through is, okay, what are all the different rates that we have and how to capture that. I found that it's extremely much easier going into ScopeStack, making sure that our rates are right. You just have someone select the right box when you're going through building out services, or build the service with the box pre-selected, and then it makes it pretty seamless. So it's a useful conversation to have. So you need a wordsmith, you need a pricing person, you need the technical person. So those three people, I think, are a good set of the people that we would need for every one of those sorts of rollouts to make sure that we have every piece right.
Yeah, and I think of it in terms of like you have a group of builders and you have a group of consumers, right? So that group of builder, it could be multiple people. To your point, it could be a single person, but there's someone or some group that is responsible for the build out of the service with pricing and language in ScopeStack, and there's another group that can use and consume those to build the solutions that their clients need. Like that's how I think about the segmentation of internal ScopeStack, some of the different user profiles. But all right, I want to get into the fun stuff because you and I kind of go back and forth all the time about like future, our big plans for world domination. All right, so let's call this phase 4 and beyond. Of right, what does the future look like for ScopeStack at Greystone, like how are you going to add additional functionality and additional use to, again, at the end of the day, we want to help your team grow services revenue, right? Right. And so like, how are you thinking of ways to leverage this tool and maybe some other tools or whatever you need to like continue that trajectory?
Yes, so I think that for our trajectory, there's a couple different like basically future things that are on the roadmap. I think so. One of the newest and shiniest fancy tools that we're enjoying quite a bit is questionnaires, which we're starting to roll out and begin adopting internally. We have adopted actually internally for a couple different teams already the surveys, and basically for anyone that doesn't already know, surveys, you fill out, here's all the information for your project, and then it will start building the project for you automatically if you build recommendations. So we're hoping to start using that to build, basically, to cut our scoping time down, because that's one of the challenges that we're currently seeing is that it takes a long time to scope a project still. Even with the degree of automation that we have, we still spend some time on it. So being able to say, hey, I don't have to go in and select X blueprint, and I don't have to bring in these services, and I don't have to type these things manually. Like it's if you build it based on thoughtful questions and thinking about what which questions could tie to a recommendation for a project, then you can actually build the project, have the project build itself, so that you can just go in. Okay, someone did a survey. Click. There's your project now.
Yeah.
So it's pretty awesome. I'm very excited about it.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, so the original thought around the whole thing was, I used to scope a bunch of like wireless surveys as an example. I was like, I know if I can give like the square footage, the type of facility, the applications that they're going to run on it, and maybe that's really it. If I can answer some of those basics, there's some more that I could answer. But like one, I want to make sure I or the sales executive or whoever is collecting the right information in that very first client conversation, right? I don't want to have to then go have another client meeting to go ask questions that they could have asked, right? So we started thinking through, okay, well, how do we put this in the hands of sales? And we started going through like, how do we put this in the hands of our end users, our customers? Like that's a shift. But right now, what we're doing is doing exactly what you said. So ask what questions you want to ask, and you can use it. You can stop there. Just use it to collect information so that the engineering team, when they're building out the project and the scope, they have all that data readily available for them. The next phase is, if you want to go as advanced as what you're talking about, is, okay, based on how they answer those questions, I can actually recommend the right services based on that, right? And it's like programmatic recommendation of services as opposed to, trying to go find the right blueprint and really craft that solution yourself. It's kind of taking the idea of like that builder group and that consumer group to like the next level of, hey, I can build all this, get all the logic from all my smart people into this form. Not everyone else is not smart, but like you could just have some very easy ways to collect information to then build that service as if the smart person was doing it for you, right? And dramatically less time. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening there, for sure. Do you ever see?
And I would even.
Do you ever see y'all extending some of those forms to customers?
I would potentially, I'm not sure if we would go fully customer facing, but we do have, we have kind of a large sprawling organization. Like we have a couple partner companies that we work with where, some of our partner companies might want to at some point submit a survey, but not, they're not in the Greystone ecosphere necessarily. So being able to have them be able to submit that project request from, a company they're related to us, but they're not. Yeah, they're not exactly us. Like that sort of thing might be more our use cases, to have some of our business partners be able to submit a survey if they want to. And it depends a little bit on which type of survey we were looking for. For training, that might be one where it'd be more customer facing. Right. Yeah. Like we can give that straight to a client and go, hey, you want some training? Here's a form that helps you figure out what kind of training you need. Yeah. So that might be one where we would roll it out in that way. I think other folks might have more, use cases where it would make sense that way, and I think that it would be a good use case for a lot of different companies. Yeah. Well, I love like the conversation, just because again we've kind of partnered on this for several years now, and
Y'all have been great partners for us. And so just having you kind of speak into both the good and the bad of what it was and how, it took time, but you're seeing positive results moving forward, and you can kind of see more positive results coming, right, with all the fun ideas that we talk about. So, I genuinely appreciate you getting on here and just kind of telling that story. With that, what are some, kind of wrapping it up here, like what are one or two practical pieces of advice, whether it's ScopeStack related or just some of the conversations you had internal to your team related to it? Like, what's some advice that you would give another MSP as it relates to anything in this topic that we just talked about?
Definitely can give a couple pieces of advice there. So number one piece of advice I would say is talk to your ScopeStack onboarding person, talk to your ScopeStack representatives. They're extremely good. Like, it's one of those that, like, don't hold back questions with them, especially in the early phases. Like, if you're confused about anything in the early phase, like, it's worth that extra, hey, what about this thing? Like, it's one of those that I feel like there's been a lot of value in the collaborative dialogue that we've had with ScopeStack. So it's one of those that I would say anyone that's going with ScopeStack, like that dialogue is super valuable. So don't hesitate to ask about things, like, especially like it's especially as it regards to, like, first time. You want to make sure that you get that first time build out right if you possibly can. So that's one piece that I would say. I think that when you're going through your initial processes, I think it's worth also asking the question, so in this proposal, where are the areas that you mess up in your that you find, like, and not to like, you're doing a bad job, but just like, where are you struggling in your proposal
areas
generation process? Where just like where do you find the areas that, I always have to check this one number that I always mess up, or that the pricing's always wrong here, there, the other. Keep track of where, like, figure out where you're struggling, and, like, make the list of that so that you can figure out where exactly you need to be addressing those things. A lot of those problems can be addressed with ScopeStack. Like, hey, this number being wrong can often be addressed by some cool merge data to be added to your proposal. So that's a huge area that I would say is focus on, okay, where do we struggle? And really, even backing that out one step further is, where are we struggling in our approvals process? Where are we struggling in, trying to make a project? Where are we struggling? Like, figure out where your pain points are throughout your entire process and get a list of those so that you know where your pain points are. And then that's something that you can approach with, okay, can ScopeStack help with any of these problems? That's one thing that I would suggest. And ask that to multiple people, not just one person. Ask that to, the person that proofreads your proposals. Ask that to your technical representative. Ask that to your, the PM that's running the project. Like, every single person, try to get a good idea of where the pain points are going into this.
Yeah. No, that's awesome advice. So again, I knew this was going to be a great conversation. So Lex, like, if anyone wants to talk to you, just pick your brain on it, or learn more about Greystone, like, what's the best place? What's the best way to do it? I know you're still not on MySpace. I'm just kidding. Not MySpace. TikTok? You doing your TikToks? What's the best place for people to find you? Oh
gosh, no. Yeah, so best place for people to find Greystone is at greystonetech.com. There's a contact us little window there that is super useful. There's also a call-in phone number that's 303-757-0779. So either of those will get to us. If you want to talk to me specifically, you can ask for me specifically, or you can just talk to Greystone. Like, any of us will be able to kind of help you. Like, that's our team. Just, we want to help. So even if it comes to someone's desk where it's not supposed to be, they'll get you to the right person.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Lex. I appreciate you joining us on the podcast, and I'm hopeful we'll have you on another one for sure once we actually have global world domination like we talk about. So it's going to happen. But again, thanks for joining us. For those of you that are interested in learning more about ScopeStack, you can go to scopestack.io. If you're interested in checking out the free account, there's a free sandbox account out there that you can kick the tires on and just check that out. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, highly recommend you do that. We have great conversations like this one and many others. You can go to scopestack.io/podcast and collect that information there and subscribe. So again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there.